What the hell, people? Why do you hate Shallan? Halt! I do not hate Shallan Davar. Shallan is one of my favorite characters. I thought that her character in Words of Radiance was fantastic. I even enjoyed her in The Way of Kings. That's not what this video is about. This video isn't about my personal taste. What I actually want to talk about today is Shallan's character in The Way of Kings. I have read countless people talking about how Shallan is their Shallan is their least favorite character. I kind of came in with that preconception that, okay, well, Shallan is going to be my least favorite character because everyone else seems to not be terribly fond of her, but I really enjoyed reading her chapters. However, this got me thinking. I wanted to really figure out why in the hell people didn't like Shallan. What made people less interested in her than they were in Kaladin and in Dalinar, and why that is, when on the surface, she's a very interesting character, but why within this story, within The Way of Kings, why were people not interested? I think there are a few interesting conclusions. Before I get into my analysis, if you aren't subscribed, consider clicking the like button because, gosh, golly gee, I do appreciate it. This is going to be a spoiler dive into The Way of Kings. I will not be spoiling Words of Radiance or anything, but The Way of Kings, spoilers. As kind of a writer myself, I am interested in what makes Sanderson's characters tick. He has put out a massive amount of lectures and interviews and so much about how he writes, his methods, and is such an excellent teacher. In one of his lectures, and he's probably talked about this multiple times, he talks about why readers often dislike certain characters, not because there's something wrong with them, but because they grow a bond with one character over another. And I think this is part of the issue of writing an epic series with multiple characters in different places who aren't interacting, because you're jumping around between different stories. And in The Way of Kings, it is really not apparent how any of these characters are connected until the end. So in a sense, you're jumping between very, very vaguely connected people. In that sense, you start to become attached to one character over another. In The Way of Kings, people usually get attached to Kaladin because we're with him the longest. We see his backstory. The book is really about Kaladin mostly. Shallan and Dalinar are kind of in the wings, building up their story to what's going to become their important moments. My first point is pacing. Sanderson has made this point in his lectures. When you are tearing readers away from their favorite characters to go focus on another character, it can be rough. I think that Sanderson gets better with his later books in doing this, but in The Way of Kings, it seemed particularly rough when things were getting just so juicy and interesting with Kaladin or with Dalinar, and we get pulled away to Shallan, who is in a drastically less hostile situation. When you're going from Kaladin getting shot at, getting beaten the shit out of him, wondering if he's going to survive, to Shallan going, I wonder if I should steal this soulcaster. I wonder, Let me illustrate it this way. For the first 100 pages, we're dealing with Shallan and Kaladin. It's only when we get to page 102 in the mass market paperback where we learn about what Shallan's plan is. So that first section, we are seeing Shallan explore Kharbranth in kind of painful detail. We learn about the crew of the ship, which is unnecessary, extra, not super important. And she's trying to become the student of this great teacher, Jasnah Kholin. But when we get to the real juicy part, that great line that ends Shallan's section, and then Shallan would steal it, talking about the Soulcaster, which is like, what? So that's Shallan's mission. And we think, okay, this is going to be really interesting. I really want to see her steal this fucking Soulcaster. That's page 102. She doesn't steal the Soulcaster until page 666. She slid the working Soulcaster into her safe hand within its sleeve, stepping back as Jasnah opened her eyes and glanced at the robe, which now sat innocently beside the non-functional Soulcaster. Obviously, we're dealing with a lot of other stuff in that sequence. In those 600 pages, we're dealing with Kaladin and Dalinar, and their situations are considerably higher stakes. Most of what Shallan is going through in those pages books, and we don't see her too often, but when we do, she's talking with Yasna, having discussions about philosophy, which is interesting, but it can be frustrating, especially because we're with her for so much time trying to decide when, how, or even if she should steal the Soulcaster. At some point, you just get so frustrated with her progression because these other characters, you have a sense of progress all the time, but Shallan just feels kind of stuck. Sanderson talks about this in his lectures a lot, about you need a sense of progress for people to stay interested in the story. And Shallan makes very, 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 very slow progress when stealing the Soulcaster until finally she just makes a snap decision. And then for the rest of the book, it gets more interesting because she has the Soulcaster. She's afraid of getting caught. She's making progress in trying to figure out how to use the Soulcaster. In the first half, she's just trying to decide if she should do the thing that she knows she has to do. And Sanderson has some really jarring moments of jumping between really high stakes, almost like cliffhanger moments. After Kaladin fails the sideways bridge method, he's getting the shit kicked out of him. The chapter ends with just the soldiers kept kicking. And it's like, oh my God, this character who you care about so much, you want to know what the fuck is going to happen. And then the immediate next chapter is about Shallan in the Palanium, the library. It's just long descriptions, the information, the parchment, trying to unravel the mystery. And yeah, that is interesting on its own. But when you're jumping from this incredibly high stakes life or death situation to, let me discover this and I'm still trying to figure out if I should steal the Soulcaster or not, etc. I see why people would start to resent Shallan, not because she's a bad character, but just because of the way she is taking time from the characters that we're a little more invested in at the moment. There are other things going on. She starts to fall in love with Kabzol. That fucking piece of shit. Fuck Kabzol. Oh my God. A lot of people don't like those romance scenes, I realize. I actually liked it. I liked Kabzol, you know? I thought, well, she kept thinking there's something weird about him. I'm like, give the guy a chance. He seems like a great guy. He seems like a perfectly swell fellow. I started to like their romance a little bit, The jam was cute and everything. Boy, was I fucking wrong with that. Shallan's story got super interesting at the very end of the book. That's when everything got interesting, honestly. Her motivation was very singular and wasn't progressing in very clear ways. The elephant in the room, the reason why people complain about Shallan the most is the humor. There are cringe moments. Shallan is sometimes cringe. But I think more of the issue isn't so much with the humor, but with bloated dialogue, especially when she's trying to be quippy. I didn't think the quips were necessarily bad or the humor, but the amount of words used when delivering the humorous lines, it seemed unnecessary, almost like Sanderson was trying to write her as being excessively formal. I think he kind of sheds that quality a little bit later in the books, like in Words of Radiance. That's a little bit less there, and she's a little less formal in her quips. The humor, I think, it's just kind of like, okay, you either think it's cute and clever or whatever, and you let it go, or it makes you cringe and makes you stop in your tracks. I didn't have that experience with her dialogue. Sometimes the conversations would just run on, overstay its welcome, and feel a little bloated. Characters would say things in more words than they needed to. Now that I'm reading Oathbringer, it's really a huge improvement in terms of how he's writing this dialogue. That's my impression of it. I'm curious to hear from people who really dislike Shallan, who think that she's just a drag on the series. I'm curious of what you have to say. Maybe there's more to Shallan that I won't enjoy in Oathbringer. I don't know. I personally think that Shallan is a fantastic character. I thought that her arc in Words of Radiance was beautiful and wonderful. She is probably my favorite character in the series, except for Lift. Am I right? Lift. What the hell, people? Why do you hate Shallan? These are my theories. I'd be interested to hear what other people have to say. The video is done now.